Happy Monday. Happy Motivational Monday. Healing Journey Reflections. So I am back. Are you excited? I'm excited. How are you feeling? Yes. This is going to be a good one. I get my inspiration either from things that I hear people say, something I read, or something that I am going through, or maybe it's a question people have asked me, or it's just something that I feel God has put on my heart to share. So this is where I get the topics from, any number of places. And tonight's topic, the title, 3 ways knowing yourself can limit you. You're probably like, what? How does knowing myself limit me? Are you serious right now, Beth? Yes, I am serious. You could be blocking your level up in your life, personally and professionally, by knowing yourself. Yes. How is this possible? Because that doesn't make sense, does it? But here's the big problem. I'm going to be giving 3 ways. Now, sometimes knowing ourselves can be a good thing, right? I'm eating. I know my body. I know maybe I'm allergic to a certain food. I'm going to avoid it. Or maybe I know my body. I'm full. There's no reason to eat anymore, right? So there are some, I'm not saying knowing yourself is a terrible thing, right? But when we make our decisions, particularly our lifelong decisions, things that can either be permanent or a long-term consequence of a decision made by knowing ourselves, we can get into problems, particularly when it comes to relationships, marriage, and business relationships. Starting a business based on knowing yourself, or not starting a business based on knowing yourself, marrying someone, or choosing to go in a different direction because you know yourself, can be a big problem. And a lot of people are basing their decisions based on knowing themselves, knowing what they want, knowing what their goals are, and they are actually regretting it. A lot of people are in very unhappy business relationships. A lot of people are in very unhappy marriages. It's a big problem when we just go based on knowing ourselves. So let me start to explain this. So 3 ways that knowing yourself can limit you. Way number 1, when you know yourself, you can limit yourself to yourself. I have a whole lot of notes on this page, so I'm going to be looking to make sure that I'm not skipping something. So when you see me looking down, it's because I'm just checking my notes. I have so much information to share, and I feel this is so important because people are making lifetime or long-term decisions and having consequences that they didn't intend to have happen. So, yes. Here is the thing. If you're making your decisions, now I'm speaking to Christians, but if you are not Christian, then you're still, of course, I invite you to listen, because you may be curious and may have questions about things that I may actually be able to answer through this. Or maybe you used to practice Christianity, but you feel like discouraged because your life has just continued going in circles, repeating patterns. Why didn't Christianity work for me? Why didn't God and Jesus work for me? So I'm about ready to tell you 3 possible ways. It's not all limited to this. There's other things that can be going on, right? But I'm about ready to break down 3 ways that you could be limiting yourself, okay? So when you are making your decisions based just on knowing yourself, you're limiting yourself to yourself and you're not open to God's will, okay? So I'm going to give an example to make it a little bit more clear. I'm going to give the example of Moses. All right. So if you are not aware, Moses was really fascinating. Moses was one of the greatest people ever to have lived, in my opinion, right? So I am not trying to throw shade on Moses. Trust me, all right? He was, I believe, I forget where it was. Someone said like he was the greatest prophet, but he saw, you know, God almost face to face, right? He had this intimate relationship with God, right? So he was literally one of the top people in the Bible who is respected and famous. But he made a lot of decisions based on knowing himself. And because his point of view was centered on knowing himself and not always, that made him not always open to doing the full will of God. So actually, let me back up a little bit. There are a couple different ways that God's will works. There is God's perfect will. That is where the full blessing for our lives is, right? That's his perfect plan for us. That's what he created for you, for me, for everyone, even before time existed, much less even before we popped into the world through our mother's womb, right? That was the channel we came in, was through our mother. But God had a perfect will for us, right? He had a preferred will for how our life goes. He also has a permissible will, meaning we are human. None of us are perfect. None of us are God, and we are going to mess up. But guess what? Here's the real cool thing about God. He already has a plan and he knows that we're going to mess up. So he does have like all of that covered for when we do step out of his will. But the full blessing is not there. So when we are going, for example, into business or into marriage, which are like the two most top important relationships, in my opinion, because they involve money, they involve time, both on a family level and a professional level. Money, time. You can never get back your time. You can always make more money, but with the wrong partner, you could end up in financial ruin, right? God's perfect plan is never for us to, end up in financial ruin, but he may permit us to become partners with the wrong spouse or the wrong business partner. He's not gonna, we have free choice. That's the beautiful thing about love, right? Love does give choice. So he gives us the choice. And so here's what Moses did. Moses, for starters, he had like a really interesting childhood. So he was born at a time where the boys were targeted, right? There was an attack on the men. Pharaoh was out to destroy all of the Hebrew babies, and particularly the boys. So what his mother did was she hid him in this river, and she hid him kind of in the plants that were growing in the river. And then the sister just kind of watched to see what would happen. And Pharaoh's daughter came along, said, "Oh my goodness, this baby is beautiful." So Moses was beautiful. He found favor in he found favor in this daughter of Pharaoh's sight. And she said, "You know what? I think I would like to adopt him." So she adopted him, but she was like, "You know what? I didn't give birth to him," right? As a mother, when you give birth, your breasts begin producing milk, but she hadn't actively given birth to him. So she couldn't nurse him. So she's like, "Well, what am I going to do?" So his sister was like, "Hey, I know someone." And so Moses went right back to his mom for, I think, for some time. I'm not sure exactly how long, but he ended up still getting nourished by his mother. But then eventually he ends up moving back into the palace. And so he's raised with all these Egyptian customs. but he's adopted, right? And I have never been adopted, but I have listened to people who have been adopted, and there are all sorts of different emotions that arise when you're adopted, right? And so, he knew where he was, but he also knew where he had come from. And so one day when he was older, I'm not sure the exact age. I'm not a Bible theologian. So sometimes these like little details I miss, but like the general story is that I feel that God was showing me was um, he wasn't fully operating in God's vision, God's point of view. He was operating in his point of view of, look, I have this power as an Egyptian, all right. And I'm seeing my people who come from where I was born, the Israelites being abused. So one day he sees in particular this one man getting beat. And what's he do? He kills the Egyptian who was beating the Israelite. Now, it does say that he looked around to make sure no one was watching, which means if you look around, you're guilty about doing something before you even do it, right? When you know you're doing the right thing, you're not looking around going, oh my goodness, what if someone sees me? When you know that you are doing the right thing, you're like, okay, well, go ahead, watch me do this. If you want to watch, if you don't want to watch, no big deal. But he kind of looked around to make sure no one was watching. He didn't see that someone was. And so in the end, he ends up having to run away from Egypt because he committed murder, right? He did something based on himself, his knowledge of himself. He was like, I know that I've got, all these perks of being an Egyptian. So, I've got some authority, some influence, but I also know, myself, and this is wrong. I can on my own merit and my own influence, I can rescue my own people. But it didn't work out the way it was meant to. So then off he goes. He ends up becoming a shepherd, and he's there again. I don't know for how many years, but he's serving as a shepherd. He gets married. His father-in-law is Jethro, who ends up coming up later on in the book of Exodus, who's like really super wise, right? But while he's there, somehow he loses himself. He loses his identity because God shows back up and says, hi, guess what? It's time. I've been listening to my people. My people have been crying. They are in misery. I hear their cry, and it's time to deliver them from Pharaoh. It's time that they left their slavery and go back to where I have planned and prepared for them. And you, Moses, are the man for the job. You are who I'm going to use. And Moses was like, no, God, you got it all wrong. I know myself. I'm not worthy. No one's going to listen to me. No one's going to believe me. No one's going to know who I am. I've been gone for a long time. I know myself. And you know what else, God, I know about myself? I know that I stutter. I know that my speech, it's hard for me to speak coherently. Listen, God, thanks, but no thanks. It is this, I'm summarizing it, but it's this dialogue that goes back and forth 4 or 5 times because Moses is operating from his point of view of knowing himself. He's like, nah, I know me, God. I'm good. I'm really good. I am not cut out for this. Finally, he agrees, but he says, you know what? I really want my brother, Aaron. And God agrees that Aaron is going to be his assistant, that Aaron will help him to speak. God didn't call Aaron. God didn't show up in a burning bush and say, hi, Aaron. Well, Aaron was not in the place where Moses was. Aaron was back in Egypt, to my understanding. But God didn't show up to Aaron. He showed up to Moses. God's perfect will, God's preferred will, was to use Moses to deliver the people, to be their leader. And he did step up, right? And he was an amazing leader. When I read this book, I think, oh my goodness, this man had his work cut out for me. It's not a job I would have ever wanted. He's in the desert for 40 years having to manage all sorts of different problems, legal, social, family, food, navigation. He's the GPS, but you know, well, he's not really the GPS. God was the GPS, right? But he's like leading them around. I mean, he had all these hats, right? He was an amazing man to be able to do any of it, even a portion of it. But yet, because he knew himself or thought he knew himself, and that's the problem. And that leads me right into step 2, or reason number 2, why, when we know ourselves, we can limit ourselves. What happened with Moses is his identity, he had not fully healed. He was operating from a place of broken identity. When we say we are not worthy, when we say no one is going to listen to us, when we say no one is going to believe us, when we say, who am I? No one has heard of me. No one's going to know me. That's not our problem. Because remember, from what I shared earlier, God has a preferred will for us. That means he had it all set up for Moses. He knew that Moses had everything inside of him that it took to go back to Egypt, speak to Pharaoh, work through the negotiations, because it was like a whole negotiation if you go through. And that's not really the point of what I'm trying to talk about tonight. But it was all these different negotiations that he kept going back and forth with Pharaoh. Pharaoh was like, oh, I'll let them go. Oh, wait, no, I'm not. And then there's these plagues, and then Moses has to keep going back, right? So he's a negotiator. He's a lawyer. He's all of these things, spiritual advisor. God knew that he could do it because God's point of view is different. Who does God see us as? God sees us as how he created us. He sees our innermost being. He knows our potential. He knows what we can do. And he knows exactly what he wants to do with us. And yet, when we have not healed our pain, our brokenness. Now, I'm not here. I don't know exactly what it was that Moses hadn't fully healed from. It could have been the adoption. It could have been the fact that he'd had to flee Egypt. It could have been, all sorts of things. It could have been, I imagine that you go from being in a luxury, top tier palace to a shepherd, right? Wearing sandals that were probably dirty. He says he took his sandals off because he was on holy ground with God, right? So if he had to remove his sandals are probably like filthy dirty. He probably just was not seeing himself as anything more than like this shepherd who now had fallen on hard times. Like, it's over for me. Right? But it's never, here's the thing, it's never over. It is never over until God tells us it's over. And at that point, when it's over, right, we transition to go to eternity. So that's when it's over, is when we're out of here, when we leave this physical planet we call Earth. So it's never over. There is always something. And here's the thing. It also tells us in the New Testament that we are to be renewed by the we are to be renewed by the transformation of our minds. So how I see myself, or what I know about myself today, is different from what I knew about myself a year ago, which is different from what I knew about myself when I was 20. Which will be very different from what I will know about myself when I'm 60 or when I'm 80. And for me or you or anyone to just base a major decision based on what we know about ourselves in the moment, especially if we are functioning in life, and I said functioning, not thriving, not flourishing, we're functioning in a broken identity. When we naturally do not feel unworthy, when we naturally do not feel worthy, we feel unworthy. When we are naturally trying to do everything perfect, we are not God. We will never be God. We are never going to be perfect. It's okay that things don't always go perfectly, right? That's okay. It's not meant to for us. But here's the thing. When we are making our decisions, I know myself. I'm going to give a personal example. So, one of my biggest problems in dating in the past was I knew myself. I said, I love adventure. And I know I get bored easily. I was like, picking men who I could have quote unquote adventures with. Well, they were adventures. They were permitted by God. Were they God's perfect will for me? Were they God's preferred will for me? Absolutely not. One way I know that is because nothing came out of those relationships. There was no development that came out of that relationship that left me at a better leveled up level spiritually. I never dated for someone who could help me get to know God better. I dated for who I thought I could have fun with. Because I knew myself. I knew that I got bored easily. There are specific people and I can think about, and I remember being like, yeah, I don't think I could handle more than 2 years of you tops. Some people, it's like, oh, I can't handle you more than 2 hours tops, depending on the person. But I was always seeking adventure. I was not looking, and I always said, it would be boring. It would be boring to settle down with someone. One of my biggest fears in life, and in a relationship wise, we'll see how it all comes out. I'm not saying anything about who I will marry, but one of my biggest fears was that I would someday end up as a pastor's wife. And I was always like, that would be real super boring. That would be a boring life. That wouldn't be adventure. Now, as I've healed and God has shown me new things about his life, as I've learned to submit and do my best to follow his preferred will, I still do my own thing sometimes. I'm not going to lie. I am not always submitted. I can go off the right or the left, right? I can veer off, but I'm more quick to come back. And I do not make my decisions anymore regarding men based on adventure. And I also have learned, right, that I still love adventure, and that's okay. That part of me is never going to change. I'm always going to love adventure, but knowing that I love adventure is not going to be my choice for choosing or being with a partner. It's what is it that is, where am I supposed to be? Where does God want me to be? Those are two different things. And I've also learned, this has taken time, that adventure is my responsibility, right? Having adventures, those are my responsibilities. To look to a guy to have adventures with, that's not his responsibility, right? So I limited myself a lot by making choices based on knowing myself that I like adventures and that I get bored easily. But if I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I will never be bored. It doesn't matter about the other person. If I am walking and doing what I'm supposed to be doing, if I am working on my own business, if I am working on whatever it is that I am meant to do in life, it doesn't matter who, well, it still matters who I'm with, right? It's very important, right? But what I'm saying is, it doesn't matter. It's not his responsibility to entertain me, right? So as a result, my thinking, my viewpoint, my perspective has changed, which allows me to be open to possibilities, right? I would be open to being a pastor's wife, even though it was like for the like years since a child, I was like, that would be the last person I would ever want to marry. And I'm not saying that God would ask me to marry a pastor. I'm not saying that that would be like where it ends up. I'm just saying like I would be open to that idea versus he talked to me 5 years ago, I would have been like, no way. I know myself. I will never choose that. I will never go that way. But when we are transformed in our thinking, when we renew our minds and we begin to heal and we begin to see ourselves and we begin to see others, not from our perspective, which is limited to just our experiences. I was literally making decisions based on my experiences. I had to go back. Why was I looking for men that I could have adventures with? It goes back to my childhood where I felt bored and like I was not able to have adventures, right? I wasn't really allowed to play with any of the kids in my neighborhood. I was very isolated a lot in my childhood. I was pretty much on my own by myself much of the time. When I got into high school, it got better. And I was able to see friends more. But for years, for like about the first 16 years of my life, I was very isolated. As a result, that was driving the decisions that I was making and how I knew myself, how I saw myself. It was driving my desire to have adventure. I remember I used to sit in front of my window and there was like a highway, right? That went not far from my parents' house. And I'd see all these cars going back and forth. And I would fantasize about when I could get my freedom and have a car. Let me tell you, I love a good car adventure. I love a good road trip. It does, I think, go back to my childhood when I wanted out so bad and I wanted to taste freedom, right? So, but having the healing, knowing even where it came from, my decision making made a huge difference in my ability to now not just make my decisions based on how I know myself, because I'm always changing, I'm always evolving. And I know, just like I know you and everyone else, whoever listens to this video in the future, we could all do way more than we think we can do. Our life, the plans for us, it says in God's word, and I don't have the exact verse because I didn't write it down and it was just coming to me now, but God will do exceedingly abundantly above and beyond all that we can think of or ask for. That means that I can't even imagine what it is that God wants me to do. And that's kind of, I'm curious, like, what does that look like? And here is the third reason, which kind of ties into the first and second reason why knowing yourself can limit you. By knowing yourself, you are leaving out the factor of self-evolution, that you are going to evolve. Ask anyone who's been married for 5 years, even, much less 50 years or 60 years. They will tell you that they are still getting to know the person that they got married to. Why? Because the person they got married to is not the same person they said I do to on the first date, or not on the first date, maybe, on their wedding day. And it's even that in business, right? You may start out your business at $0 or maybe -0, depending on how it's going for you. But you and your business are going to evolve. And if you choose the wrong business partner based on what you know about yourself or what you just know about them, that other person, here's the thing, you could evolve and the other person could not. Or the other person could evolve and you may not evolve. I would hope not. I would hope you're going to be leveling up. But it happens, right? People get into business partnerships and marriages and they don't factor in. They make their decisions based on what they know right now. And listen, this is not judgment, because as I shared a little bit ago, I was making all my decisions for dating based on what I knew about myself at that time. So If we are yoked with someone who we will outgrow, what's that going to look like in our business? That's going to look like a hot mess. It's going to look like a disaster. It could end with the business partnership. It could be even with a friend. It could end with that business partnership that started out good, having people having bad feelings and hard feelings. And then you have to go through a forgiveness process. The same thing for a marriage, right? You could then end up finding out that you have to go through this whole forgiveness process because you evolved through the marriage and the other person didn't, or the other person is evolving and you're not for whatever reason. Now you're jealous and insecure more than you were at the beginning. And it's not adding up. Here is the thing. There is this verse that says, God gives us the desires of our heart. You can look at it two ways. I think a lot of times American Christians, maybe possibly European Christians as well, but I feel like it's very predominant in America. That means that God's going to give me whatever I want. It's not the case. You could also interpret it as the desires that I have are given to me from God. They're not my desires. My will and God's will could be two very, 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 very different things. And I'll give you an example. So I've been reading Ezekiel. It is intense. I think I shared a little bit about it the other week. Ezekiel, there is this moment, my jaw dropped. I'd read it a while ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but I hadn't read Ezekiel recently. Ezekiel's really interesting. He has to like act out all these things for God. He's a prophet, but he's kind of like, it's almost like going to a movie. It's like the movie of Ezekiel, and you're watching like how he's doing things and how he's acting them out. And that's like God showing Israel what he's about ready to do and how he's feeling. So God's like, your wife, who you love, who is your treasure, she's going to die. And guess what, Ezekiel? You are not going to mourn her. You are not to mourn her. Does that mean that God didn't love Ezekiel's wife or God didn't love Ezekiel? No, but he was using Ezekiel to kind of point out that he's really upset. So God was furious that all that he had done for Israel, all that he'd done for these people who he loved, who were descendants of Abraham pretty much, and who he'd given these promises to. He was like really ticked off that he was not getting credit for it. And they were worshiping idols, and they were doing all sorts of crazy things. I think they were even doing child sacrifices, some of them, to these fake gods, right? He was like, I am not about that. And I am going to destroy them. And I'm not going to feel sorry about it, because they've been warned before, and they're not recognizing that I'm God, and they are going to know that I am God. And I am not sorry for them knowing that I am God. So Ezekiel, your wife is going to die. I can't remember if he said your wife is going to die tonight or your wife is going to die tomorrow. But I was like, no time really for Ezekiel to really probably get his mind wrapped around it fully. And then his wife died, and he did not mourn her. Now we have free choice. We have free will. Ezekiel could have been like, God, forget you. This was my wife. This was my treasure. Hey, I'm in exile here. Things are really bad, and you just made things worse for me by taking my wife. What in the world? I'm going to grieve her. He could have done that, but he didn't. He chose, for whatever reason, I don't know, but he chose what God had asked him to do. And that was really hard. I can't imagine it. I could not imagine getting married and then God saying, well, you know what? Your husband's going to die. And guess what? Don't feel sorry. Keep on moving. Don't shed a tear. Like, what? I can't even shed. Like, I can't even cry one tear. Not even one tear, God. Not even one. It's just a tiny little teardrop out of the corner of my eye. No, you can't. That had nothing to do with the desire of Ezekiel's heart. I am willing to bet that the desire of Ezekiel's heart was to grieve the loss of his wife. Sometimes grief takes years. I know a woman, her husband was really tragically killed in an accident, and she's still grieving him, right? Grief can take years and years and years when we lose someone that we love. So it would have been his will, his desire to grieve his wife, right? So we don't always get the desires of our heart. But sometimes God gives us the desires of our heart. They're two separate things. And if we're following the desires of our heart and not the desires that God's placed in us, we can get ourselves into bad situations. I shared a couple weeks ago, I'll share it again a lot more briefly, but my desire of my heart in 2015, because I was overworked and stressing myself out, was to have adventure. I wanted to have fun. I needed a stress break. So I chose to date someone for fun, just for fun. What did it do? It ended up that this person was a sociopath, I guess I would say, because he had a lot of things that came out about him, right? And when I ended the relationship with him, it didn't go so well, and he wanted to take control back, and he raped me in my own home, in my kitchen. Was that God's preferred will for me to go on an adventure and date the wrong person? No. In fact, God warned me, as I shared a couple weeks ago. He warned me in a dream. He warned a friend of mine through a dream, and she shared it with me. And he warned another friend of mine, not through a dream. She just felt uneasy and said, Beth, nah, this is bad. This one's real bad. But I was making my decisions not based on God's desire. I felt even at the time that I was supposed to be waiting on someone, waiting for something to happen with someone else. But no, I didn't listen to that. I went ahead and did my own thing. And why did I do it? Because I knew myself. I said, look, I'm stressed out. I need this. Well, I could have just changed what was stressing me. Hindsight's always 20/20, right? And I'm not saying that to beat myself up, right? I have gone through and I've had to forgive myself for that, right? That actually took a lot of self-forgiveness on my judgment and my decision-making process. But I got myself into trouble knowing myself, knowing that I wanted adventure, knowing that I wanted to have fun, and thinking that I got impatient, really. And I also got into a place where I wasn't trusting God to deliver on something else that I felt like he might deliver on. I went way off, like way off track. So you may be like, okay, Beth, that's all great, but how do I even figure out what God's perfect will or preferred will is for my life? How do I figure that out? And I'll be honest with you and say, none of us know really the mind of God. None of us. To ever say you are 100% sure, for me to ever say I am 100% sure I know God's will, that would be a lie. I don't read his mind. That's not a skill I have. That's not a skill any human has. So, or any other created being. In fact, actually, this is a side note, but Jesus doesn't even know the time that he has been appointed to return to rapture the church. Jesus, the Son of God, does not even know the appointed time when he will come back a second time to earth. So there are things that will always be unknown and a mystery. And guess what? One of these days or moments, God is going to turn to Jesus and be like, hey, it's your appointed time. Earthlings, you can go, you can go get those earthlings. I don't know why I said earthlings, but you can go get my church. You can get my believers, those who are trusting me. Go bring them back to me, escort them back to heaven to be with me, right? He's going to get that his orders, so to speak, or his directions, right? So how do we get our directions? Well, we can do a 3-step process. We can first worship God. So we can kind of just begin making that connection to get into his presence. Worship looks all sorts of different ways. For some people, it's singing. For some people, it's dancing. One of my preferred ways is to walk. It doesn't really matter, but it's worship, to worship him. The second step is pray. Tell God, look, this is what I'm thinking about doing in business. This is who I'm thinking about dating. This is who I'm thinking about marrying. What do I need to know here? Do I need to know anything? And then the third thing is you want to praise him. Now, we do always want to have faith, right? So after it says, come boldly to the throne and make your prayers and your requests known to God. So we're not supposed to go like in front of God and be like, oh, I don't know, I'm all confused. No, we're just supposed to go boldly and say, God, this is what I'm thinking. This is what, this is my desire, and we can straight up ask. And then when we have a need, we're supposed to straight up ask, right? We're supposed to boldly come. We are covered by the blood of Jesus. So we can boldly come before him and ask and make our petitions and our prayers known. And then when we're done, we know confidently that we are answered. Now, the answer could be yes. The answer could be no. The answer could be wait, not yet. But we are always confident that we have been heard and we are answered, because it says his ear is not too heavy that he cannot hear, and his arm not too short that he cannot save. So if we're asking him to save us or asking him to help us, of course, and we're asking him to listen, of course, he hears us, he helps us, right? Sometimes it doesn't always look the way we think it's going to look. It sometimes could look real different. Just like I was saying with Ezekiel, I am sure Ezekiel, it never looked to him like he was going to just lose his wife and grieve his wife. So things could end up looking real different. Now, I don't think that the majority of people are going to have to live out Ezekiel's walk. But if you step out, if you're American and you're listening to this, and you step out and you go to Nigeria, you go to Pakistan, you go to China, and you see what believers are, you go to the Middle East, like Iran, even Israel, Palestine, you see what Christians are going through there, and you'll learn really, really, really quick that sometimes it's really not all about us, and it's not really all about our desires. Yes, our desires are important. Yes, our needs are important, but the big picture is God. He is the big picture, right? And so that is when we're making our decisions, knowing ourselves, knowing what we want, knowing what we need. We may think we need something that we don't need. We may be wanting something that is not meant for us, that is bad for us, right? Like those apples, you go to the grocery store. Well, I buy organic. I'm pretty snobby with my fruit, but some of the apples, they may be polished and waxed, especially if they're out of season, right? You're trying to buy an apple in July at the grocery store, and that apple was picked back in September, almost a year earlier, and you bite into it and you're like, this is just not good. It looked good because it was all polished and waxed on the outside. As soon as you bite into it, you're like, oops, shouldn't have bought that apple, right? So, when we're acting on what we know we want, when we're acting on what we know we need, we are limiting ourselves, and it's just not always the best for us. I'm not trying to say God is insensitive to your needs, but I am saying that if you step outside of America and you see what other Christians are going through, it is wild, wild. I watched this one video on in Pakistan. This man, because he's Christian, he's really at the bottom of the social economic ladder, and his job is to unplug sewer systems. I watched this video where he took off his clothes and submerged himself up to like his chin, his head he didn't put under, up to his chin in sewage water to unplug a drain. Now, of course, this is not God's preferred will, right? God's preferred will is never to have his children, his babies, those who he delights in, to be persecuted. That is, I'm not saying that it's his will at all, but what I'm saying is that that man who made that choice to become a Christian, he said, yes, Jesus, I believe in you. Yes, God, I believe in you, and stepped aside from what the society was saying he had to follow, to actually choose that lifestyle, because he could easily renounce Jesus. He could be like, you know what? I was wrong. Christianity's fake. Jesus is fake. I'm going to go back to the approved religion in this country. Do you know how easy it would be for him? How easy that would be for him to make that choice? But for whatever reason, he's chosen to kind of go through life a little bit, not a little bit, a lot more difficult, on a much more difficult level than I could even ever imagine. I'd just be like, kill me. I'm not going into that sewer. It's like, you may as well just, I'm not doing it. I'm not going into a sewer. It's like, I don't know, do what you have to do to me, my family, but I'm not putting myself, my body into that water, whatever it is. I'm just saying that when we choose God and we choose to follow him, it's not always easy. That man obviously knows himself, and he knows probably a lot of dreams and hopes that he has, but for whatever reason, he has chosen to go in a different direction and follow God. I'm sure he has dreams to have a beautiful home. I'm sure he has dreams and desires to have a safe place for him and his family to eat, to live, to work. And he's still following God. So that's like, it's a little mind-blowing to me. So I think a lot of times when those of us who are in America, we have this like teaching that's been taught about, you know, knowing yourself, follow your heart. God knows your heart, so just follow your heart. But you know, it doesn't always lead us where it's best for us, and it can actually limit us, and it can actually not only limit us, sometimes it sends us way back, right? When I chose to follow my heart and my desire to have adventures, it set me back. Like I had some major healing. So you may, and the last thing you want to do, I started to say it, to figure out and get a better understanding of God's will, is you want to end in praise, because he does always hear us and he does always answer us, right? And to just thank him that for what he's going to do, whatever that thing happens to be. So now here's the thing though. You may be like, that sounds great, Beth. That sounds really great. But I don't know how to transform my mind. I don't know how to begin seeing myself out of my trauma. I don't know how to begin making different decisions for how I go about my business. I don't know how to make different decisions in my boundaries for what I say yes to in terms of dating. Well, I can help you with that, because here's the thing. I had to go through a whole process. I had to learn how to heal and redefine my identity and be able to be open to new ideas about myself, seeing myself differently, making my choices in life differently. How do I do that? How do I even begin to transform my thought process, my mind, so that I can see myself differently, so that I can actually do different, instead of having the same cycle repeating and repeating and repeating? Because typically that's what happens. When I was always following based on just knowing myself and knowing my desires and knowing what I wanted, what I was doing was I was repeating the same cycle with different people. And then at one point it got real bad. There were a couple of really bad ones. I ended up almost bankrupt because of someone once too. Yeah, I made terrible life choices based on my desires and knowing myself. I made some real wrong turns. God is amazing. We can always begin to transform our minds and begin doing things differently. And I can help you. I can definitely help you with that. I have a program that has 21 steps that help you to heal and redefine your identity. It's step by step. We are body, we are mind, and we are spirit, right? We're three parts. The coaching program I have is in three parts. First, it has to do with the mind, then it has to do with our spirit, then it has to do with our physical life. So my program addresses all three aspects, multiple aspects of you. Because that's one of the problems that we've done in church is we've just been taught one thing, just how to take care of our spirit, pray. And even then, we're not really taught fully how to take care of our spirit. Prayer is not enough. Let me tell you, it is not enough. I can tell you that from personal experience. So I can help you. I can teach you the steps for transforming your mind, your spirit, and your physical, the physical aspects of your life as well. So there's the practical, there's the spiritual, and then there's like that thought process that can get us, there's that phrase called stinking thinking. I don't really like that phrase because it's kind of negative, and we don't really want to be putting ourselves down. And that's one of the things that I can help teach, because a lot of times, based on the patterns that we've gone through in life, and the disappointments and the hurt and the trauma and the broken identity, we argue with God like Moses did, like I shared in the beginning. Oh, I'm not worthy enough. I'm not this. I'm not that. I'm not good enough. I'm this reason, that reason. I stutter. Whatever reason it is, we have all these excuses. How do we stop making those excuses? How do we stop talking bad about ourselves? Because Moses was pretty negative about himself. He was real down on himself, very, very, very down, very harsh talk about himself. And a lot of that we also have, right? We limit ourselves because we know ourselves. I'm stupid. I'm not pretty enough. I'm too skinny. I'm too fat. I'm too tall. I'm too short. I'm not popular enough. I don't have enough money. I don't have a car. I have a car, but it's not a Mercedes or a Bentley. Whatever it is, I'm not, this person had this success. Where's my success? There's all these things that we repeat in our minds over and over and over again. And then we're thinking these things about ourselves, and they become part of our identity. We have to learn how to break out of it. And so I can absolutely teach you that. If you want more information, you can always reach out to me. I'm going to be putting in the comments below a couple of links. I'm going to be putting the link to my program so that you can just go straight there if you're interested in seeing about the healing and redefining identity, so that you can stop limiting yourself just based on knowing yourself. And I'm not saying it's bad to know yourself. I am discovering, I learn new things about myself every day. Well, maybe not every day, at least every other day. Yeah, sometimes every day. But we're always learning new things about ourselves, right? So I got back off track, but I'm going to also put in the comments below, in the description below. I'm also going to put my email address there and an appointment if you just want to chat and you want to talk to me one-to-one about how I can help you heal, redefine your identity, begin making your decisions from a different point of view, based on God's point of view of you, feeling worthy, feeling confident, forgiving yourself, forgiving others, right? These are very important aspects for being able to heal and being able to have a limitless life, right? We are meant to have a life without limits. We are not meant to be limited, but we do limit ourselves. So yes, I'm going to put the link below as well in the description, where you can just click it, set up a time, and I can chat with you to find out how I can be of better service to you. And you can ask me questions about, how I can help you as well. So I'm going to put those links in the description. So you're welcome to always reach out to me with questions or with comments. And I'm going to just check over my notes to make sure I did not skip something? No, I got everything. I got all the key points that I wanted to make this evening. So I hope this helps you to think about your life, your purpose. It's so much bigger than you really think. There's so much more out there for you. There's so much out there for you. God has so much for you. You are so significant, you know, and it's all possible, and nothing is over till it's over. So if you, I'm just going to go back and say, if you're saying, I've tried therapy, I've done coaching with other people, I have gone to conferences, I've prayed, nothing worked for me. Well, I think we should still talk, because I honestly know how God has changed my life with these tools that these different tools that he shared with me for my own healing journey on how to redefine and heal my identity after going through rape and then a heartbreak. So yes, I can definitely help you. And so reach out. Don't worry about what's the past, what didn't work in the past. That was the past, right? Here we are in the present. And in the present, I definitely have tools that I can share with you that can help you so that you are not limited in your thinking. And when we're limited in our thinking, we make limited decisions that do not lead us to the futures that are preferred for us, right? And we want the best, right? We want to have not just a functioning existence. We want to have a flourishing and thriving existence, because we are royalty. So we want to walk like we're royalty. We want to carry our head high. But that confidence, it's not fake it till you make it. God is not fake. He gives you real confidence. It's real. Everything he gives us is real. We just have to learn how to get it, how to access it. Sometimes we just don't know how to access the real, right? And that's what I can teach. So have a wonderful evening. I look forward to next Monday. I have no idea what I'm going to share with you next Monday. I had no idea that I would be sharing this with you. This came into my heart to share on Sunday afternoon. So I will see what we talk about next week. All right. Until then, have a wonderful evening and peace.